This is around what the elements or ingredients that go into creating a climate where the Sociocratic principles can really thrive. And we'll be talking about a programme called Building Out to try and do that. So quick little intro of who on earth we are. So I'm Abi, I'm from Outlandish, which is a worker cooperative that builds digital data tools for social good. Aaron, do you want to intro who you are?
I'm Aaron from Agile Collective, so a very similar worker cooperative, doing very similar stuff basically, tech for good.
And both organisations have been using Sociocracy for quite a few years. I think Outlandish has been about 7 years. And we also, along with bringing in consent-based decision-making and Sociocratic principles like circle structures, we also use lots of communication approaches around kind of conflict and differences. And that's kind of what we're going to be talking a bit more about today. Over to you, Aaron, for a little bit, I think.
Sure. So the goals for today is we'll just tell you a little bit about what Building Out is and what we're trying to achieve. And Abi's going to just explore some of those approaches that create the culture. And if we've got time, we're going to share some things we've learned from the program so far. We have one of our principles is very much to be as practical as possible. So obviously theory is important, but we want to give people that flavor. So in that spirit, we're going to try a little breakout exercise. So depending on how we're doing for time and hopefully not how quickly I speak or we speak, but how we get through the slides, hopefully we'll have enough time for that, and then we can get on to sharing some of the things at the end. So Building Out is Abi.
Oh yeah.
Thanks. So it's a program of services aimed at building openness, understanding, and trust (OUT) of teams, so that they're better able to achieve their goals. And this came out of us just throwing some ideas around, and those were the words that stuck for us, and it turned out they were also the first 3 letters of Outlandish, so that felt good as a sort of starting point as the program's being incubated within Outlandish, but also as a sort of collaboration with a number of other cooperatives. Why are we doing it? Abi, you've added this in since I last saw it.
Yeah, because I think lots of you might have the question like, why are 2 kind of tech co-ops sort of like doing this stuff as like is a different type of work. We're not delivering digital projects here, and it's mainly like Outlandish's mission is to change the world through technology and also be a positive working environment. Like they're just as important as each other. And so through practicing these approaches and using Sociocracy, it really affected the happiness, fulfillment, and kind of effectiveness of Outlandish. And so I think in that small way, we're making the world better because the projects we deliver are more effective. There's lots of people that are happier. And I kind of wanted to bring that out to a wider group of people, and to kind of spread the understanding out and the sort of skills out to be able to build really effective teams in every organisation. So it's a little bit of an experiment, and it isn't our normal work. So over the last 6 months, we've kind of experimented and tested and iterated in Sociocratic ways and agile ways to work out if this can work for us. So we're testing and seeing where it goes, because we believe in the approaches that we practice and have seen the benefits in our own organisations. I don't know if you've got anything else to add, Aaron.
No, that's good. I mean, this is on the next slide, just to sort of give a bit of a sense of the people involved, but also the organisations. So, as I said, like Outlandish is sort of incubating this program. So all the sort of work, all the money is flowing in and out of Outlandish, and then the other cooperatives or the people in them. So myself from Agile Collective, Lucy from In Fact, Doug from We Are Open Cooperative, and Pete Burden from C-Step and Practical Governance. We're all collaborators within working on that circle, essentially, which we've established within Outlandish. And the question, because we all know each other from CoTech, so the network of tech worker co-ops in the UK, and we've all known each other for a few years, and we've been, in some cases working on projects together in different forms. This is slightly different, so more like, from my point of view, a sort of placement, time spent working in Outlandish, and primarily on building out, but on other things as well. The question at the moment for us is like, how does this evolve? And that will depend on the sort of what we're trying to offer, but also how we're structuring that offer in terms of the people involved. And that's something that we're approaching step by step and trying to take the next good enough step, safe enough step for ourselves and our co-ops. And we don't know what it'll look like yet. But it's an interesting, as Abi said, it's a really interesting experiment of bringing together groups of people who are interested in this work, who maybe primarily have come from a different context than the tech context. So the next slide. So what we've done so far, and I'm going to start at the bottom actually, is I wanted to check this with Abi. So we've supported 150 people, and the time frame from that, is that from last July, which is sort of when we sort of started, or is it since 2020?
It's the majority. So the initial things we started to do was public, so consent-based decision-making workshops, and they started just over a year ago. So that was the kind of first thing, because people were coming to us to ask us, how do you do that? So we thought there might be a demand for a public workshop, and that's probably 30 odd people before July, but otherwise it's in the last 6 months, I would say.
Cool, yeah. And on those consent-based decision-making workshops, like there's Outlandish started doing some, Pete was doing some, and invited me in to go into we started doing them in a couple of conferences, and then invited to go and work in a charity and provide some training, and it sort of became something that we really enjoyed and that people were getting benefit from. But the question was, what then? So if you do a day's workshop, that's not enough really to know and sort of really get that feeling of what consent is. And it is quite different from what we're used to, whether we're used to voting or consensus or whatever. So we've sort of followed that on to doing bespoke training for teams. So again, sort of maybe a day's workshop with a bit of follow-up and a bit of preparation, and then some more thorough sort of team support, which may involve sort of coaching and pair conversations, and that's going beyond consent and much more into communication, compassionate communication, or NVC, or emotional intelligence, whatever you want to sort of call it. And I'm going to go on to the next one, Abi. So we're kind of still working on the messaging, the language, like how we're talking about our offer, and also evolving, what we're sort of offering as well. So at the moment, it's really based around the core aspects of consent and emotional intelligence, or non-violent communication. And the reason for that is that once you can agree how to make decisions, then you can agree how to make changes together. And those changes might be, adopting a circle structure, or it might be, agreeing some policies together. But without consent, I think Jerry, I can't remember exactly how you say it, Jerry, but you say it very nicely. Sociocracy without NVC isn't sociocracy, or something along those lines. Without the practice on the communication side, I think consent throws up challenges for teams and groups of people, and they may not be best equipped to deal with those challenges. And they may be things that have been there for quite a long time, interpersonal or differences of values, etc. And so those two things really are like the core of what we're looking to do. And those are lovely pictures of all of us who've been involved so far, and others as well, I think, who are still. So Kaylee from Outlandish is sort of getting involved, and others, and hopefully others in Agile Collective as well. And that's the sort of first glimpse of a branding that is outlandish, recognizably outlandish, whilst also being distinct. So we're trying to like start with that next step so far. And in the last sort of 7 or 8 months, we've worked with a number of different organizations. So quite a lot of co-ops, because there's a good fit there. Sociocracy in the worker co-op world is the hot thing. So it's not a difficult sell in that sense. And a lot of people are really interested in it. And the more people that, if you know someone in a co-op that's using it and they're talking about it, you're kind of interested and want to find out more. So the consent-based decision-making workshops and co-ops have been going well. And we've done, usually we'll get a couple of people in from a co-op on a public workshop, and then they'll go back to their co-op and go, hey, I think we should run this for ourselves and start, using consent in our co-op. So that's pretty much how that's happened for Third Sector and Dot Project and co-operative, and Suma as well. Suma is an interesting one, just from referring back to Ted's question about numbers. Suma being a very big organization, whereas Dot Project, Third Sector and co-operative, we're talking about 10, under 10 people or 10 to 15 people. So the difference of scale there's interesting. When you're bringing in something that's quite different, I think it's easier for a smaller group to adopt consent, and where you've got the ability for everyone in the organization to sit around a table or in screens at the moment. And we're also working with the Sanger Institute, so they're a client of Outlandish, and that came up really from just difficulties on the project, and difficulties in communicating and valuing each other and making decisions effectively. And so I think it's Abi and Kaylee sort of made this offer of like, hey, look, we can help you with that, and this will help us with this project work. And that's been going on for sort of 3 months or so, and is making things better, which is great. And Catalyst, who are a funder, similar but different. I don't know so much about that relationship, but again, not a cooperative. So it's nice that there's recognition that these things fit within the sort of maybe more traditional areas of our society, and that these sort of ideas and needs are sort of coming up and becoming more prevalent in people, whether we give them labels like sociocracy. Mm-hmm. At the moment, that's maybe less recognized, but the needs that people have are clearly recognized and sort of coming up a lot more.
Yeah, I think the needs for both of those non-cooperative partners are around collaboration and effective collaboration, and kind of building networks and partners. And how do you do that? Like, really, how do you do that? What are the behaviors that you need to model and live for that to actually really happen? So that's kind of where their need has come in to what we're doing.
Abi, it's Mark here. Do you want to take questions from the chat as they arise, or do you want to leave them to the end?
We can do. How about we do some now? So we're just about to cross over anyway. I haven't been looking, to be honest.
We've only got one from Hannah. I wonder if Hannah wants to unmute and ask a question. If not, I can ask it.
Yeah, I can see it. Yeah. So right. To what extent did everyone in the organisations with which you've worked with, buy into the need or wish to adopt sociocratic principles?
I think it's kind of related to what I was saying around where they start from. Is not necessarily wanting to adopt sociocratic principles, but bringing them in and meeting their needs around collaborating better, or there might be some difficulty or conflict in a team, or a need to have a flatter, fairer, more equal, inclusive team. And so we don't necessarily lead with we're bringing in sociocratic principles. We listen to what their current need is and support them to improve in that way. And often decision making comes up as a big issue. There's power dynamic issues and things like that. And so then we bring in the consent based process and start to bring in the idea of the sociocratic principles in that way. So we kind of lead them in by understanding what their needs are, rather than sort of telling them that this is what we're going to do with them, if you see what I mean. Does that answer the question? Yeah. So shall we move on to the next little bit, which is a bit more around what on earth do we mean by these approaches, and what other things are we bringing into teams to support the kind of culture that that builds the Sociocratic principles. And lots of you might have seen this, but this is something, so Pete Burden kind of brought most of this stuff into Outlandish and into Agile to start with, and this was one of the first things he would talk us through. So it's a really key kind of thing to a key foundation about what we're trying to do. And I think that the Sociocratic principles encourage people and give them a structure to be able to start to bring really important things into their work environment, the things that are below the waterline, so below those defences. Really bringing in what you're feeling about something, and what your values are and what your principles are and what your goal is. And often the kind of more traditional work culture or environment or a team environment concentrates on the stuff above the defences, which are quite safe, but won't necessarily result in a lot of change. And so we kind of often bring this in to say that the approaches we're bringing will start to sort of raise up more to the surface as you feel safe to do so, as you feel safe to do so. And then it's how you deal with them as a team that the approaches we kind of bring in will help move you through the kind of rocky waters, if you like, as they come up. It's also about really identifying that there will always be difference in assumptions, in perceptions, in people, in lots of different ways. And it's not about being right or wrong or something being the right answer, but really sort of being able to sit back and see the world from different perspectives. So some people will see the rabbit and some people will see the duck. I don't actually know which one I see first now because I've looked at this so often. So it's both, and that's fine. There's not a right or a wrong, and it's just encouraging and supporting people to be all right with there being difference and there not being a clear answer and a clear way forward. Even it's just that people will perceive things differently and have different assumptions. The two public workshops we currently have, one is the consent-based decision making, focusing on that process particularly, and the other is it's called practical communication skills for teams. And the center of it is a really simple one, but actually is something very difficult to get into your kind of habits of speaking and thinking. And we shorthand it as font. This is very similar to lots of MVC approaches, but thinking about something that happens and breaking it down into what you've seen, which is different from your thoughts, which often have like judgment or assumption included in there. Your feelings about it, so real like emotions, anger, sadness, happiness. And the hardest one, which people almost always forget, is what people actually are needing or not getting and that they need from a situation. So one of the workshops we're doing is really just helping people to practice doing this. So I use this so much now, like just internally with my kids. When I get annoyed with them, I'm like, okay, what's going on here? Like what am I seeing? What am I thinking? What am I feeling? And what do I need? And it's not so much to kind of structure every conversation like that, but it helps bring clarity and understanding to what is really needed at any given situation. And so this is kind of quite a key concept that we bring into teams and help them to practice it and embed it into their sort of everyday ways of working. Aaron, chime in if you've got anything great. I'm missing. And I think most people will know some kind of group development chart like this. This is Bruce Tuckman's one: forming, storming, norming, high performing. And I think quite often people kind of see it and go, oh yeah, whatever. But I think really this is like the center of what we're trying to do with this, the support we want to deliver. And that is to really help teams move through these development stages. And so often the storming, you'll go back between forming and storming. So forming is, not really wanting to please everyone and not really finding difference and kind of trying to be the same and everybody get on, and kind of it feels quite anxiety building because people are kind of second guessing and trying to fit in, and then comes storming where the differences come in. And I think often people aren't sure how to deal with the differences that come in a way that moves them through to norming, and that might be shutting them out, it might be fighting, and for us it's about calming that state, not calming that stage down, but making that stage normal. It's really normal, that will happen. And it's how as a team you can sort of lean back and let it happen and move through into the norming stage. So that's really what we're trying to do with the Building Out programme, is to help teams move through these stages so that they become really effective and happy, and then they actually deliver the goals quicker and more and better than they would have done. So I think I'm going to hand over to you, Aaron. How many have we got?
You've got a question as well if you want to take it at this point.
Yeah, sure, let's go.
So Wes says, I'm interested in how experience of working differently in turn then affects our understanding of how we could work differently ourselves in our own organisations and groups. And the question is, how do you move this work beyond the usual actors and towards a more mainstream audience?
Yeah, really good question. I suppose, I mean, Erin, you can definitely answer this if you've got something, but the usual actors will be the ones that lean in and start engaging with it. And for me, what I see when we start to work with the wider team is by practicing and by showing the benefits, then that starts to filter out to to a more mainstream or less likely to kind of come to a public workshop about sociocracy audience. So it's by building the skills of the people who have the energy for it, who will then build the skills of people that they are connected with. So it's kind of a ripple effect, as opposed to like trying to do huge marketing campaigns or like convincing people to come when they're not quite bought in yet. It's modeling the behavior, showing the practice, and seeing the benefits that will bring it to a wider audience, but quite slowly and in a kind of rippled way. What do you think, Aaron?
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. I mean, I think we often talk about we just need to, just needs two people in an organization, in a team, in an organization. It could be a huge organization, actually break it down to a small team of 10, and two of those are interested and they sort of can start, and that's the starting point. And then through modeling and through trying things, learning from them, you can create a ripple effect. And I think you can do that with organizations as well. So I think we've seen with the sort of movement of sociocracy that, it's probably not more than 2 years ago that not many people had really heard of it in the UK, or worker co-ops, I don't think, really. And now, just from one or two organizations doing it, talking about it, other people started getting interested from other worker co-ops, and that I know more about the worker co-op movement than I do about other cooperative movements, which is why I'm specifying. But now it's kind of becoming the dominant sort of organizing form, and consent becoming, a much more common way of making decisions, and that's brilliant. And that has, to me, has just come through that sort of ripple effect. That's quite natural. I think breaking out into the charity sector, for example, where that is an interesting challenge. But I think if you can start with one and talk about it, and for those people to talk about it, then change can happen that way.
So this is a few kind of potential practical things to do, or things to remember around building collaborative behaviours in your teams. So we thought this would be a good thing to kind of end with. And we bring this slide into most of our sessions, and we kind of highlight different areas that we're concentrating on. So these are the kind of main areas that we sort of focus in on. And then lots of these are familiar in agile approaches and sociocratic approaches. So, but assuming the best of people, listening, actively listening with genuine curiosity to understand rather than waiting to speak, meeting people with empathy and understanding, respectfully speaking out your own truth, making proposals based on needs and aims, valuing dissent. So actually, when a difference comes in, that's an opportunity to learn and to build, and learning from success and failure, which I think some of these reflections are coming out about as well. Anything to add, Aaron?
No, I'm reading the amazing reflections. Sorry, so I'm letting you speak.
All right, can I read some now and you do the last bit?
Yeah, absolutely. How are we doing for time? So are we finishing at 5? Yeah.
Yeah.
5 minutes, wasn't it? Yeah. Okay. So yeah, we thought we'd just bullet. I mean, this is just things that we did in a round in our last team meeting to sort of gather things that we've learned. It's definitely not a total of what we've learned, but some things that sort of highlighted. So far, and this is sort of speaking for the last 8 months or so, for everyone, and the team has grown actually. I think it started with me, Pete, and Abi in July, and Lucy and Doug sort of got involved in the last 6 to 8 months, and Kaylee has dipped in and out as her availability is enabled. But for everyone, it's hard work. Running these things. I'm sure Ted and Jerry can testify to that, and Mark and all the other people doing this sort of people development work. But it is very fulfilling, and not just for us, but for the public workshops that we run. The sort of engagement and the depth that often comes out is remarkable. Really, it's been amazing. And it has made a difference to some of the organisations we've worked with so far. Bring it into Dot Project and Third Sector, who have quite different cultures of decision making in their co-ops, and seeing those things start to take shape and to bed in with either quite established teams in Third Sector's case, or Dot Project, which was very much in a forming stage. They recognised that need and to sort of have an agreed way of making decisions together, and timing for that was really good, and so it was making a difference for them. But I think something that we've also noticed from feedback is that there's a lot of challenges and barriers that people who want to bring change into an organisation face. Resistance of one form or another, whether that's sort of interpersonal histories or structural challenges. There are things, and those people need support, and that's one of the things we're sort of quite conscious of. We want to try and create a community of people who are interested in this kind of thing, that who are able to talk to each other and learn from each other without it being peer-led and not sort of led by one or two individuals, and certainly not ourselves, but as we're practitioners as well and have busy day jobs in our own co-ops. So that's something that we're sort of pondering at the moment and doing some design work on. There's something that comes up time and time again for me. So the simplicity of getting clarity of the aim. So the aim of a proposal, or the aim of what this team is trying to achieve. So easy to forget that, and really easy to forget it when you're bringing in a different way of working. We forget what we're trying to achieve, and I think consent works particularly well when it works in relation to a clear aim that everyone has consented to in the first place. modeling the behavior helps us to deliver the work. So in our team, in the sort of building out team, we try and take time and space to really practice the kinds of behavior and bring up stuff that maybe has happened between individuals, and spend, maybe we'll just spend a meeting just talking about that and going through that and doing some active listening, so that we're on board and clear with each other. And that's more important than doing a checklist of the operational stuff that needs to get done for us.
I think for me, that's like the biggest learning, is that the value in modeling what you're trying to bring to others. So walking the talk instead of just telling people how it's supposed to be done, but actually, okay, well, let's test it out and let's see how well it works or not, and what we need to practice and what we need to learn about. And the other thing was that doing something new, the second to last bullet on there, stirs stuff up in your current teams and your current sort of power dynamics, and that's been really interesting as well. So it's like, it's a new thing for Outlandish, it's a new thing for Agile, it's a new thing for all of the co-ops, and that changes stuff and causes a few like ripples and things like that. So that's been really interesting to learn and think about how to bring in the difference. So that, yeah,